The burning of Juan Soto jerseys may have already happened and appeared on X, but Guards fans can keep a Bieber jersey replacement off their Christmas list. Good reminder of what show you're listening to for our YouTube crowd. Hi, welcome. It is the Selby's Godcast. I'm TJ. That is still Zach, I do believe. Welcome. I'd say welcome to the insanity, but every time you get to sit down and do this, this is actually a break from the insanity.
You're telling me. Yeah. It's weird. This is the first winter meetings that I'm not at in more than a decade. And I'm still in like this weird paternity leave, not quite back or paying super close attention to things, staying on top of things, so I'll do my best here. But it's weird being away from the non-action.
No, that's fair. What would you be doing at this very moment? Let's see. Monday morning, would you be in the giant conference room with everybody else waiting for something to happen? Or would you be walking the lobby waiting for something to happen? Or would you be getting a coffee, perhaps, waiting for something to happen? Maybe waiting for the text message that tells us at what time they'll make time for us that we can go up to their suite and thus wait for something to happen.
It's such, and I know we've talked about this in past years, but it's such a different experience depending on what beat or what market you're in, right? I mean, New York reporters probably, I think a lot of people had an inkling that it was the Soto news would come down on Sunday, late Sunday. So you probably wanted to, and you might not have been able to plan this far ahead, but ideally you didn't want to fly Sunday night so that you weren't in the air when this happens, and just in case, you needed to call some people or whatever. But more than that, it's so, if you cover the Yankees, you had the Soto falling short in that sweepstakes, then it's pivoting to whatever's next, and every free agent is always on the table for your team. And then if you cover the Guardians, it's like, like the Josh Bell signing was a big deal 2 years ago because they actually made a move. They signed a solid free agent during the winter meetings. That never happens. So, but that's right. So that's the exception of the rule. So it's so different where I didn't have to worry about Soto. You're just
no.
Yeah, you're just like standing inside looking out your window as the world outside is just burning down. You're just waving, "Hi everybody. Have fun with that."
Even the Encarnacion signing didn't happen till after the winter meetings. Now, I think as those meetings as they played out, what was it? The end of 2016, so 2016 winter meetings, but into the 2017 season, it felt like every day that was becoming more and more real. As the first day you heard rumblings that the Indians at the time would get into the mix, and you're thinking, okay, sure they will. But every day it felt more and more real until eventually after the meetings when I left there, I thought, there's at least some chance that this could happen.
Didn't Oakland finish second in that bidding?
Yeah, that feels familiar.
Can you imagine Cleveland and Oakland finishing one? Well, Oakland, no, obviously. Can you imagine Cleveland? I mean, no, I guess Sacramento did make a big signing. So never mind. My example is completely blown up by the A's.
Forget about it. And by the way, while Oakland's signing a pitcher, Cleveland holds on to their ace. When will he be back? We don't know. Our best guess is somewhere through the middle of the season.
Because I saw a lot of people wondering about it. He told me in October, June is like best case scenario. July maybe is more realistic, but somewhere in there, that'd put him at about 14, 15 months, which is probably the median recovery timetable.
Yeah, it made for an interesting feeling as you kind of tried to figure out how you felt about it. On one hand, you're ecstatic because we all for a long time felt like the Bieber time in Cleveland was going to end, whether it was going to be via trade before the end of this past season or definitely by the end of this season. Well, that's not true anymore. He's at least sticking around. You will see him around for at least one more season, which is great. And peak Shane Bieber is the best they're going to get in any sort of free agency or probably trade. When he's at the top of his game for that sort of ceiling, the Guardians were not going to be able to acquire it. The downside is this team is still fighting for holding on to that top spot in the Central Division, and the teams around them are trying to get better. There are going to be some internal development, too, with some of these younger teams. And Shane Bieber is not going to be there for April, May, maybe some of June. And even when he comes back, he's not going to be 100% himself. So where this team needs to find a way to get better and improve on making it to the ALCS, Shane Bieber, you hope, following the Matthew Boyd timeline, can do it. And that may be the blueprint for the best case scenario. You want him. You certainly want to put yourself in a position where you make the playoffs, but you definitely, if nothing else, want Shane Bieber to be 80% at least of what he normally is when playoff time comes, or August, September, and into October. So it really doesn't make them better today, but it might make them much better into the future. And I'm not in any way saying this is a bad decision. I love the decision. You pleaded with them to bring him back on our most recent Patreon show. But it's interesting because similar to where we were at with Boyd, that also would have been a nice reunion, but he was already here. And so question is, how do you get better? For Shane Bieber, he's coming back. That's great. He's motivated to go get that massive payday. I also love that. But he's also not going to help you in the first few months. So it made for a little complicated work through the emotions there, at least for me.
It's a good first step because he is someone who, if he's right, you have no qualms about handing him the ball in the playoff game. And that was a priority. You had Bybee and then you had question marks. So he's still a question mark, but the upside is there. Boyd is the template. That's the blueprint. Boyd came back a little later. I mean, the timeline isn't going to match perfectly here, but Boyd came back, made 8 regular season starts. Most of them were great. Then you handed him the ball a few times in the playoffs, and he was great. Like, he did everything you could have asked him to do and more. The two talked plenty. You know, Bieber recovering, picking Boyd's brain. What'd you do to get ready? What was the ramp up like? And also, you know, there's a little bit of betting on yourself here. You know, obviously, the Guardians are, you know, kudos to them for spending some money on something that might not work. They're so risk averse, and they're committing at least $14 million to someone they know at best is only going to give them 3+ months of work this year. And it's going to be 3+ months of work that, like, you can't really, like, if he doesn't pitch well, you can't even criticize the guy. He's coming back from Tommy John surgery. So it's a command pitcher, and command is always the last thing to come back. So it'll be interesting. But it makes sense for Bieber. You know, it gives him, he was going to have to take a short-term deal to rebuild his value, to set him into the market, to land that mega contract that he's wanted. And he lives in Scottsdale. He's plenty familiar with Cleveland's rehab team, and every face is familiar at the Goodyear complex. He can keep rehabbing there. And that continuity helps. It should help him. You know, Matthew Boyd, the one difference here, he was rehabbing on his own. I mean, he was a free agent. And his plan of attack was, in conjunction with his agent, Scott Boras, was to wait until he was ready to showcase what he had and then pick a team. But that meant he had to do a lot of it on his own. So Bieber will have the Guardians people helping him. And, you know, he's had injuries before. He knows them, they know him. You know, like it's little things like his wife is due in March and he doesn't have to be away from her. He can stay at home in Scottsdale, drive to Goodyear when he needs to get check-ins on rehab and help at home, and all, like little things like that I, you know, that doesn't dictate where you sign, but I do think in a situation like his where he's looking at like the little things because it's only a 1-year deal and it's to set himself up the best to succeed when he does come back in the second half.
Exactly.
Little things like that can matter. So it makes sense for both sides. And I think if you're the Guardians too, like I'm not going to rehash everything I laid out last week, but like this has to just be the beginning. This doesn't solve your rotation's not in great shape now. And you are still banking on a guy who's going to come back from Tommy John surgery, and you don't know what that's going to look like. So this has to be the beginning. You know, if you're going to go take that risk and sign Bieber, then go do more. Like, let Bieber be, their old saying, well, getting Shane Bieber back in July will be like making a big trade. And like, fine. As long as you do some more now, like you
Sure.
can use that excuse later.
Right. And that could be a truth, and it could be a great
Right.
truth. I think that's the hope here. Certainly all sides are hoping. And yeah, and I was accused, Zach, of being a bit of a Debbie Downer on this. Not in my reaction to him coming back. Again, I think this is a great thing. I like that they're taking some risk here. I was thinking back to one of a previous time where they did something like this. Not like this, but you had the Grady Sizemore $5 million one year, and he didn't come back. It's like, uh-oh. So that's obviously the worst case scenario, but I like this risk. I think this is a good one. This is one where this team should take a risk like this because, as I said, you don't get a ceiling player like this where you can go get them often. And this is someone that already has a familiarity with your team. And you'd stress that. I think for him, having that familiarity is a critical piece of this puzzle. And this is where I got accused of being a Debbie Downer. I know I had seen he picked Cleveland, who is giving him less, perhaps, than maybe some other teams are willing to offer, but he decided to stick with Cleveland. And everyone took that as oh, cool, I love this guy. He wanted to be in Cleveland. And that's a part of it. I'm not stressing that that doesn't play some factor, that he likes being here. If he didn't want to be here and he was familiar with the medical staff, that would not, he would leave for greener pastures if he didn't like being here. That said, let's just admit what this is. This is everybody getting what they want out of it, which is a good thing. Shane Bieber gets the familiarity, and the biggest thing for him now is if he's going to give up some money, he wants to make sure that he's in the best position to come back and earn that payday come next year. He doesn't want to be even thinking about that player option. He wants to be, oh yeah, I got that main big payday in mind, similar to what Matthew Boyd was trying to do. And to accomplish that, I want to be around people who are familiar with me. I want to give myself the best chance to succeed. Where does that happen? Where the people I know are in it for my best interest. Where the medical staff knows what I'm going through, and I don't have to go the Boyd route and do it myself. I know that I'll have eyes on me every step of the way to ensure I am doing exactly what I need to do. And he's also, from a pitching perspective, going to think, hey, this infield defense was pretty good. Usually I've got an amazing second baseman out there. I got a shortstop that is capable of making great plays, although some bonehead ones too in the postseason. Jose is solid as ever at third base. I got some good defense. I like my catches that I'm working with. It's a great situation for me to be at my best. Maybe I earn some more money if I talk to the Dodgers. And Dodgers may be a bad example because they've got a good team to help him along. But I could maybe get a better deal from San Francisco or the Angels.
San Diego.
I don't know, just San Diego. I'm just throwing teams out. Maybe you could get more money from them, but isn't it worth giving up a couple of $1 million now to make sure that I am at my best for when that payday comes? And by the way, I get to be where I've loved being for my entire career to this point. And Cleveland, of course, is going to take it too. So I just feel like everybody gets what they want out of it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I think that's a great thing when everybody gets something positive out of this connection or reconnection in this case. Awesome. I love that.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this stuff went into the decision, but even just he'll be able to be around the team all spring. Like, he lives, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes from the complex, and he can spend time around Tanner Bybee and Austin Hedges and everybody else during spring training. And he doesn't have to be in Florida at spring training and fly home for the birth of his child and fly back. And like, it's an ease of life. It's a quality of life thing too. And you're right. It's okay. And that's why I don't roll my eyes at it, but like, it's always funny to me, like he turned down more money from other teams. That comes out right after the the news of the contract comes out as if, I wonder who leaked that. And I laugh because it's like you said, he's maybe he's giving up a few million right now, but that you think he's going to be thinking about that if he has a good year and he parlays that into a $180 million contract next winter? No. So it's a good setup. It's a good setup for the Guardians too. Even if he stinks, or if he maybe he doesn't even make it back. Maybe he has a setback at some point and doesn't pitch, and then opts into that second year. That's still a guy I want to gamble on a 1-year deal next year. Like I don't really see a way for this that I don't like it for the Guardians. Because even if it's an abomination because of injuries, like that's still a risk worth taking to me. And I also trust the player and the work ethic, and they believe in the one thing I remember. I don't remember who they drafted somebody at some point. I don't think it was Brady Aiken, but they drafted somebody, and they had elbow surgery, I think, and someone in their organization was just saying how they felt like their medical staff, when it comes to rehabbing Tommy John injuries, was a competitive advantage. And this is years ago, and I don't even know if it's the same people in place. But if you are confident in your ability to get guys back from that, then by all means, like what's the downside here? So it makes sense. I think it also, it's a nice little jolt of confidence probably for the rest of the roster, guys in the clubhouse, seeing that they're going to make some efforts to retain their best players here and also, hopefully add some more to it.
I also love the way that this was structured. I think the structure of how they made this work was perfect. Bieber's going to get the money regardless, but you spread out the commitment. So he's really only taking $10 million away from your payroll right now.
Which is less than he was making last year.
I recognize that $4 million, it's a $14 million commitment. I recognize that us having any sort of conversation about $4 million being important to this team is sad, and I recognize it for that. But this is also the playground that we've been looking at for a while. So it's nothing new. So I like the fact that they spread out the risk a little bit. Bieber's still going to get the money, but you don't have to commit $14 million to a guy you're not going to see for the first 3 months at least, or more. Who knows? So you are at least setting yourself up to take the jump, but there's a bungee cord behind you, but just a little bit, just to help you out. And I would love to be in a position where we wouldn't have to make any sort of comment on it being meaningful, but Cleveland has to think this way. They do. Just all the conversations about ownership and what should be committed to payroll, and when they're at this point in their build-up and their ascension, you shouldn't be worrying about $4 million. Very true. I recognize that. But I love the way that they set this up so that it's $10 million right now for 2025. That $4 million will be there at some point. And then, as you said, it isn't the worst situation in the world if for some reason he decides to come back on that. What? I'm trying to even think, what would be the worst-case scenario that I would be upset about, though? He just has a serious setback? Like, just...
Yeah, but if
beyond comprehension,
if he doesn't
setback?
pitch, doesn't insurance cover that anyway?
I don't know how this would work. I don't know how this would work.
Yeah.
Again, it just feels like everybody comes out with a smile on their face in this situation. Obviously, Bieber doesn't want to be here. He would have preferred to have the first 2 starts be like the rest of his season, and the Guardians would love that too, because who knows what ends up happening with this club if they have a healthy Shane Bieber, but that bridge was already crossed, so how do you make sure everyone's happy from this point on? I think they accomplished that, and I think fans can be happy about this too.
Yeah, and you got it done early. So now go figure out what's next. Keep bolstering the roster.
And we'll keep these short today. We don't know what's going to happen at the winter meetings. Maybe they make a move and we're back here soon, so these will be a little bit more abbreviated than typical shows. Just because of it being the winter meetings, but it does also help offset some of the recent conversations or rumors, at least, that have been floated out, whether it's on social media or elsewhere, that the Guardians are open to listening to a guy that we already knew that they were listening to on Naylor's situation, but also Lane Thomas. And on one hand, this is also in Thomas, a guy that we were talking about being a potential extension candidate. I think both of those things are still true. I think he's an extension candidate, and they're also looking into what could we get on the trade market if we were to make him available. I think they would benefit from knowing both ends of this spectrum. So hearing that his name is in trade rumors isn't really surprising. I think they will listen, but I also don't think that it takes it off the table for him to be sticking around. I mean, hell, it happened with Jose. Did they walk away? Obviously, that was a lot on him, but did they walk away from the extension in the midst of also talking trade with other teams about him? No. I just think they're looking for how do we extract the most value. If it comes via trade, fine. If it comes via extension, also fine.
So I'll peel back the curtain a little bit here. So obviously Ken Rosenthal, my colleague, is the one who wrote that, that they're listening on Naylor and Thomas. And Ken and I were discussing this the night before the story ran, which is usually how this works. Like, we usually, because he'll want to run things by me. Does this make sense? This is what I'm hearing. Or vice versa too, since he's got his ear to the ground with the whole league. This is not the Guardians calling teams and saying, hey, Lane Thomas trying to dump the salary. What would you give us? Like, they gave up a decent amount. Alex Clemmie was a highly touted pitching prospect. Jose Tena was major league ready and had some nice moments for the Nationals. And I think we saw the best and the worst of Lane Thomas in his time in Cleveland. Certainly a tough adjustment for him. Had a really rough month, had a much better September, had some incredible playoff moments. So you saw the full scope. And it leads me to still wonder what this guy's ceiling really is. Like, I think he could be a 30-30 player. I think that's the ceiling. And he's had such different seasons. Like, he had stretches where he was more contact oriented. He's had years where he's stolen a bunch of bases. He's had years where he's had 28 home runs. And so you're still wondering what it looks like when he puts it all together. And for him, probably a lot of motivation going into a contract year where if he does finally put it together, he could really cash in. If you're the Guardians, you probably want to benefit from that. He's going to be more valuable to them than he's going to be to another team. They also don't, Chase DeLauter, I don't think they want him on the opening day roster in the starting lineup. I think they'd rather have him work his way into it once it makes more financial sense for them too, or service time sense. And so it's the same thing with the Naylor conversation where it's, can you be a better team if you trade this guy? And are you going to get more for him now than you gave up for him 6 months ago? I don't see a scenario where that makes sense. I think Naylor is a much more likely trade candidate. We've talked about that at length too, and we have questions about how that would work. I think there are more paths to it making sense than it does in this scenario. But there's never been a player that the Guardians haven't listened on. So that's probably the main takeaway here.
Sure. I think position plays a main factor and probably why you feel that way too. You're talking about a first base DH, which you have that in-house, ready to go in Kyle Manzardo. We love some of these young prospects in the outfield for Cleveland. They haven't ascended to the point where you're ready to plug them into opening day lineups. Now, maybe that changes in spring training. I mean, DeLauter was doing his best last spring training to make that the case. But with DeLauter in particular, this is a guy that I'm not factoring him in at all because I don't know if he's going to be healthy on the field and the best version of himself. If that happens, fantastic. Let's have that conversation. But today, I'm not mapping out my 2025 plans with him necessarily in them. And Lane Thomas, he played center field for this club. They were comfortable with it in the postseason. Is he a long-term center fielder? Probably not. As he ages and the speed's going to decline, his best role is probably still right field, but he's capable of playing center field for this team. So what's easier if you were going to walk this line and try to figure out, okay, how could you still be a better team and trade one or both of these guys? There is more of a path, while I don't necessarily agree with the path, but there's more of a path to go sign a short-term first base DH type if you're worried about that position, protecting yourself in the case of Manzardo maybe not taking off the way that we think. Is it easier to do that or to go sign a guy that could go play center field for you and maybe put up that 30-30 season that you're talking about? I think we all agree in a one-year scenario, it's easier to do that at first base. So I think that plays a main role, too, in likely why Thomas would not end up going anywhere, and maybe Naylor could. I could see this scenario.
What about the Reds? Anything you like in Cincinnati? Terry Francona's like, please, God, no. I didn't come back to get more headbutts.
What do you have in mind?
I don't know specifically. There was a rumor that the Reds were somewhat interested in this either guy. They have a history of
always the case.
They have a history of trading for guys with short-term control. It's weird. They grabbed Chu when Shin-Soo Choo had 1 year left, and that landed Cleveland Trevor Bauer. And then they came and got Bauer when Bauer had a year and 2 months left. And they've given up. I mean, these are obviously two examples over the course of the last decade, but they gave up a lot in both instances. So, I don't know. They gave up, Didi Gregorius in the Chu trade?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But they always want short-term fixes, it seems. And they have a lot of... the Reds are actually positioned kind of nicely. They have a lot of really intriguing young starting pitching, both in the majors and the minors. They've got so many hitters that have had some success, but still need to develop more, and they're not quite sure what they have, and probably too many cooks in the kitchen there. That's just one example. Who knows? Shoot, go trade Naylor for the highest bidder and sign Pete Alonso for...
Sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Why not? Are we still thinking the best scenario here is not the one that involves prospects, but who has a starting pitcher that they would like to move and desperately is needing a first base DH type?
Yeah, but I can think the world of Juan Brito and Chase DeLauder and Kyle Manzardo, and yet if you're going to trade Naylor for a pitcher, and aren't you just rearranging deck chair? You're just going to have a leak somewhere else.
Yeah.
Eventually you have to trade prospects for proven talent, or you have to sign some free agents. That you have to add to what you're doing. You have to have a better roster in 3 months than you had 6 weeks ago.
Okay, so let me ask you, what is the bare minimum, now that Bieber is back in the fray, what is the bare minimum that still needs to be accomplished?
I don't care.
What is acceptable? I don't want to hear I don't care.
That's the wrong way to think about it, because that's how they always think about it. It's, what is the bare minimum? Screw the bare minimum. You just made the ALCS. You're in the Final Four. Screw the bare minimum.
All that is doing
the bare minimum.
It's raising your bare minimum. That's all that you're
arguing
for your bare minimum
to be more than you think you need to do. Believe me, I was the kid in school who was going to do the bare minimum to get by.
Yeah,
I could have all the knowledge up here, and I didn't care. I was going to cut every corner I possibly could.
How do your editors feel about that today?
You reached the ALCS, and you squeezed.
That's how you get back to be writing another book that you already wrote a while back, and you need to circle back and do it again.
Exactly. You squeezed every ounce of potential out of that roster. You got to the ALCS. Go do more. Raise your floor.
Where does that start then for you? Where does that start?
It's hard because I don't know what's available on the trade market. That's where I'd be looking first.
Okay, well let me flip this around, and I will tell you what they still need to accomplish. You need a mid-rotation starter first.
Good. Finally, you're going to answer some questions. Go.
Mid-rotation starter. Well, you've been away for a while. I don't need to hear myself talk anymore. They certainly don't want to hear me talk anymore. This is your first appearance on the YouTube channel in like a month, so I just want to set it up so you are getting your thoughts out.
Look,
that's all.
I could tell you what they need to do if it's in terms of like Bluey or Mickey Mouse or the purple monkey in the bubblegum tree, but I don't have much in terms of major league players.
Don't even know what that is. And I'm happy for it. Mid-rotation starter.
Coco
Bare
Melon.
minimum. Mid-rotation starter. Innings eater. 3.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a 3.5 to 3.7 ERA, 165, 170 innings. Someone that I can count on to do that. That would protect me in this rotation where then I feel like if you add that and then you have Bieber in the future,
Walker
then you have Bibee, you have Gavin Williams, who is going to get every opportunity, as he should, because I still believe in big things for him. You have a Tristan floating around in this mix somewhere who is he's not fading away. He's going to come back and get a chance to earn his spot back in the rotation. You already knew you're going to have to have some ascension from somebody in this rotation, whether it's reascension in the case of Tristan or Logan Allen, Ben Lively, but adding one more just steady, proven starter that is capable of taking the ball like in Game 3 of a playoff series, that helps me a lot. That really makes me feel better. Is that Cobb? Is that somebody else? I don't know. But I do know you need that. You cannot go to spring without touching this rotation and just saying, well, Bieber will be here someday. That's not good enough. So you need to address at least that on the pitching side.
We agree
first.
this is 2 steps above a Carlos Carrasco and 1 step above a Ben Lively?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Although I wouldn't mind another Ben Lively signing. Take a shot on somebody.
Depth.
Yes, right.
They learned that last year.
Take a shot on somebody. Keep doing that. I mean, they've proven they can, on occasion, unearth a Ben Lively. But definitely do that. Protect yourself by getting somebody that you believe in to be there every 5th day and post every 5th day. Very important for this club. Second, it's a bat of some sort, but you need more offense. And that's not... It doesn't count if you trade Josh Naylor and then fill the hole, whatever it is, that you traded away in Josh Naylor and say, see, we added a bat. You can't do that. That doesn't count. I don't know where it's going to be on the diamond.
What kind of bat?
But I don't think it really matters. They're in a position with the flexibility they have. Who is the best offensive player that you can get even in the short term? And maybe that's the best case scenario. It's a short-term addition. It's not a long-term commitment. You don't need to worry about him clogging up somebody's position several years from now when there's a prospect that you like to get them at bats. But if it's a right fielder, fine. If it's someone that can play center field, fine. If it's someone that could man second base, I don't know in this scenario what that is, but then you have the flexibility to make it work on your roster, I think.
Like I'm spitballing here. I feel like it has to be an outfielder. I mean, they've got the infield set, is it not? If they trade Naylor for something else, then maybe there's flexibility there. But if they do that, they're going to want to keep DH open. I guess I'm thinking, don't you need to just upgrade Will Brennan? Like, does Max Kepler do that? Does Jesse Winker do that?
I wanted Winker at the deadline.
Does Randall Grichuk do that?
Mm.
He's righty, but...
I don't think you can come to spring training without adding at least something else to the offense. Somebody else that's in the mix. And then I'm going to let those guys... It'll be settled on the field based on who plays well. If it's John Kensey Noel, and all of a sudden this dude's just an everyday player and you have to find a way to make room for him, fine. But I brought somebody else in here. Oh, what am I going to do? I don't give a crap. I'll find a way to make it work. That's why you're paying Stephen Vogt any salary here. You got to find a way to make this work.
Yeah, I feel like Noel's that's the sort of guy who takes so much advantage of your part-time opportunities that I'm forced to play you every day. He did that for a little while last season and then faded in September and became just a lethal pinch hitter. So, I don't know.
He's also 23. He's 23 years old.
No, I'm not. But I'm not just handing him a job.
Right. But I'm saying at the age of 23, two things are true here. You do not just pencil him in for anything and say, well, we don't know, need to get an outfielder because you got Noel and Brennan. Stupid idea. However, he's 23, and I do see a scenario where it didn't matter what you brought in the offseason. You can't take this guy out of the lineup. It's the most likely scenario with his skill set. I don't know that I would bet significant money on it, but I also wouldn't have bet any money at the start of 24 of him doing anything close to what he accomplished with this club.
Honestly, this probably ends up in them signing. It depends on what they feel Will Brennan has left to show them. If they're done with Brennan and they think, someone like Kepler or Winker is an upgrade and they can get one of those guys to a 1-year deal, it's the usual scenario we're familiar with where, this veteran isn't working out and it's June and DeLauder's crushing it in AAA, so DeLauder come up, DFA, and there you go. But at least do something to get you there. Brennan and Noel platooning is not, you can't run back the same exact lineup.
No.
You need to make upgrades. I just, you don't get to this point and then just stop trying.
No, and you can't say, well, the best case scenario happened. Soto left New York to go to the other side of New York, and he didn't go to L.A., so you got him out of the American League, and he didn't go to the Dodgers.
Yeah, but
as
now
many
the Yankees
people
are
have
going to
said.
go plug like 7 holes with free agents that add up to Juan Soto's salary.
And that's probably what they should have done, but
right.
I am hopeful that it also pushes them into stupidity mode. We've seen this before in Hardball Dynasty, where all of a sudden you have all this money to spend, and you spend it on people you should not be spending it on because you're frustrated and upset that you didn't get your first pick, and you end up in some just absolute brutal contract because you had money to spend in that offseason. That's what I'm hoping for on the Yankees' behalf.
Jake Bauers is a free agent.
I asked you this question for a very specific reason. To set us up, see, long-term storytelling, to set us up for, let's talk a little bit about, once you do a little bit more homework later this week, free agents, even trade if you want to bring it up, but just a couple of not, it doesn't even have to be under the radar guys, but people that you think should be in Cleveland's area that they can play within. Let's look at that, do some homework on that for later this week, and let's bring some names to the table that you wouldn't mind actually seeing in Cleveland. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, I like the idea. And, the Soto contract had me thinking, because, if you look at the list of free agents, and whether I was looking at Fangraphs, and they've got the crowdsourcing, and MLB Trade Rumors has their predictions, and, there's not really there aren't free agents anymore who you can get for a 7-figure deal. Most free agents who are going to be regulars or even platoon guys, they're going to cost you $10 million plus. Back of the rotation starters are going to cost you $10 million plus. And it had me thinking when I sat down with Paul Dolan 5.5 years ago now. And of course he gave the Lindor enjoy him quote. But he also said, the day we hand out a $300 million contract is the day other teams are handing out billion-dollar contracts. And I had a realization when Soto signed, I'm like, we're almost there.
Yeah.
So maybe you're still not handing out, $150 million contracts, let alone $300 million. So something's going to have to give here soon. But I never thought we'd get here this quickly.
But here we are. It's like the end of this show. Happened so fast. How did we already get here? Don't know. But we will be back later this week. Keep it locked here, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, of course, Patreon as well. Patreon.com/SelbyIsGodcast. And if you want to join the little slightly higher tier, give a little bit more contribution to the show, I've been posting these episodes here that are just filled with commercials everywhere. Commercial free. If you can get them at Patreon.com/SelbyIsGodcast. Zach, I'll see you later this week.
All right, I'm going to go watch Paw Patrol. I'll see you.